Hey, welcome to Proper Horror Show. I am way past the peak time for reviewing Doctor Sleep, but timely reviews are not what you come to this channel for. But what I can do is point out what I think Doctor Sleep did better than, frankly, any other Stephen King adaptation I've ever seen. This is part one of me fangirling madly for Mike Flanagan. Let's get straight to the point. The biggest achievement of Doctor Sleep is that it can recreate how it feels to read a Stephen King story. This won't be a spoiler for most of you, and I am going to stay away from plot details for the most part. If you've read a few Stephen King books, you know how he writes. He starts the books with lots of down-to-earth, relatable details, long paragraphs on really just humdrum daily life. In Misery, it's how Paul Sheldon's typewriter and desk feel. In The Mist, it's your protagonist dealing with a fallen tree and his sort of legal battles with neighbours. Relatable stuff. These sort of humble, relatable, humdrum details are essential to the Stephen King story because they ground things in reality and they become the foundation of his books. You have to be really anchored into that reality and connected to those characters. He has to get that right because these stories almost inevitably go into weird, fantastical places. If you aren't connected to them at the start, you are not going to be carried along to the ending. Mike Flanagan handles that down-to-earth stuff really well. The feeling of Downey's hangovers, his panic in the morning, and naturally the AA meetings that Danny's attending at the start of the film. They had a sense of reality to them that I think really matched the sort of details that you saw in The Wire. It really got that support group atmosphere down. The sort of mundanity was really believable. And of course, Stephen King there is writing what he knows. And it was good that he managed to bring a lot of reality and a lot of authenticity to that and into the film of Doctor Sleep. That sort of reality and authenticity about the AA meetings and Danny's life as an adult, that makes the story really grounded and it makes it really strong. Now, of course, the big contrast from these detailed slice of life beginnings is Stephen King's endings. As I was saying, in a Stephen King story, you've got the contrast between the really grounded beginning and the very fantastical ending, where Stephen King is writing about the immaterial. So, these battles and plot twists are happening in heavily metaphorical, emotional, symbolic realms. So think of the battle with Pennywise at the end of It, basically all of Book 6 of The Dark Tower, or the end of the short story The Long Walk. You're really keyed into the character's emotional state and where their mindset is. That's what's really important to Stephen King, is resolving that. And that can be really satisfying, but you would also have a really hard time saying what was actually physically happening to the character. What I mean is, try and describe what is actually happening to the characters. If you had to reenact what was happening to them with Lego figures, it wouldn't go well and you'd probably be kicked out of the play school. You know how it goes. But back on topic, Doctor Sleep is basically that classic Stephen King format. Start grounded, end weird. As always, the symbols, the imagery, those sort of trappings that are very idiosyncratic to the story, those are built up over the course of the film, and they come into play fully at the finale. You're in the realm of strong symbolism again, but also far from any actual logic of what's really happening or how anything is actually working. It's a classic Stephen King ending. For me, it is a stronger ending than most. I'm thinking particularly of The Stand here. But, Stephen King's difficulty in ending stories is kind of a famous meme at this point. It's something that even Stephen King jokes about in his cameo in It Chapter 2. Something Mike Flanagan does really well is work in Stephen King's realm of the fantastical and the symbolical. I mean, heck, Mike Flanagan even managed to make the basically unfilmable, heavily internal psychological plot of Gerald's Game work. Kind of thinking about it, Mike Flanagan could be the guy that could do that live-action remake of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Huh? Netflix? Yeah? Get on it. We're gonna do this. Yeah. This is gratuitous and it's staying in. Gatsby. Gatsby. Look at that face. Look at your face. Oh my god. All things serve the cat. I've had smoother filming sessions. So when we get to the end of Dr. Sleep, we are firmly in the realm of Stephen King logic and imagery. Now, it's a major achievement that Mike Flanagan manages to make that work and make it make sense for the story. Now, okay, the fridge logic hits really hard after the film, but this is a Stephen King film. You know, complaining about fridge logic in the ending is like complaining that the story's set in Maine again or that the protagonist is an author. There are certain things that go with the territory, you know what I'm saying? That's what I wanted to make this whole video for. It's a thing that stood out to me most was Mike Flanagan really captures the feeling of Stephen King's story for all the good points and the rest. Yeah, that was the main thing that stood out to me. Like I said, this isn't a full review, but I've got a couple of other quick thoughts that I wanted to throw in there. I certainly like the film enough to watch the director's cut. I think I'll get a lot more out of it that way. One thing I'm really hoping to get out of the director's cut is just more time with the characters and more time on character building. It's always a strength of Mike Flanagan films that the characters are really well sketched. He always takes time with his characters and makes us engage with them. And I think it really helps that Mike Flanagan tends to work with a rota of regular actors. So he really knows how to get the best out of them. Some of Mike Flanagan's regulars that you might recognise in Dr. Sleep are Henry Thomas and Bruce Greenwood in a small role. I'll also say that not that Rebecca Ferguson did a bad job as the main antagonist, Rose the Hat, and also, my goodness, that's Stephen Kingism, that name. Sorry. It's not that Rebecca Ferguson did a bad job of that role, but I'll be honest, I would have been more interested in seeing Mike Flanagan's regular Kate Siegel give that role a go. I think she would have done a really interesting job of it. Based on how Kate Siegel did as Theodora in The Haunting of Hill House, I think she could have done a really good job of it, and I would have loved to see that. As for general impressions of the film, I liked it a lot, you know. The visuals were great, some of the scary sequences were genuinely unsettling. The first one in particular, I think, sets the tone really well for people and gives you a good taste of what you're going to get. But I wouldn't say it ever felt gratuitous either. It was really well balanced. On the downsides, there is a sort of an inevitability to some of the plot that I think acted as a small downside to the film. And by that I mean when we actually go back to the Overlook Hotel, which is, you know, laid out in the posters, laid out in the trailer. I don't think I'm spoiling anything there. When we go back to the Overlook Hotel and there's so much effort at recreating iconic imagery from The Shining, I think some of it is done, I suppose, almost by rote. So some of the things that happened in the Overlook Hotel, some of the characters that we meet, it felt almost like obligatory meme service, as in, this thing was iconic in The Shining, you remember this from The Shining, so just down a couple of member berries, because we're going to feature it again. Sometimes it worked really well and was part of a conversation that really fueled character development and built on what happened in The Shining, but other times it was very much, I think, lip service. There's a particular moment when Rose the Hat sees a recreation of some iconic imagery from The Shining, and she basically has no reaction to it. It's a letdown because, well, why would she? It's not really relevant to her. It just felt like something that they decided to throw in, you know? Now, it's a small problem, but I did notice it. I want to give a balanced, I want to give a balanced take. Also, as with Gerald's Game, Mike Flanagan is very cocky in throwing in references to the Dark Tower. That's not really a downside at all, actually. I guess it just makes me hungry for a really good Dark Tower adaptation that it kind of looks like we won't get. You know what, screw it. Forget the Neon Genesis Evangelion live action remake. Mike Flanagan should do the Dark Tower adaptation. You know, as long as he doesn't mind giving up 12 years of his life, I think he could do it. I mean, I think the guy must be passionate about the Dark Tower because he's made 2 Stephen King adaptations and he's filled both of them with Dark Tower references. Like, this one especially has even more blatant references to the Dark Tower than Gerald's Game, where I think there was just one reference to car is a wheel. This isn't really a downside. I just really like a good Dark Tower series. Netflix, can you get on that? Or the Locke Lamora books, that either is fine. Any hoot, in addition, the plot is kind of basic, but that's not really a problem. I don't really need a complicated plot in a well-made film. The characters were really well drawn, and that made this 2-hour and 30-minute long film fly by. And I'm definitely up for watching the 3-hour director's cut because I think that's going to have more of what Mike Flanagan does best, which is the character work and the world building. Also, frankly, it's just really fun being back in the world of The Shining and seeing an adult Danny Torrance. Some of the recast recreations of Shining characters are done really well. Above all, I've got to single out the Dr. Sleep version of Dick Halloran. That was absolutely uncanny and just fantastically done. The recreations in the Overlook Hotel are obviously going to capture people's imagination, but what really stood out for me was little moments that were consistent with The Shining. So there's an interview that Danny has, and the office layout is exactly like Stuart Ullman's office when Jack Torrance is interviewed in The Shining. And when I was watching this just sort of popped out to me straight away. It was like, oh my gosh, they went and did that. That was fantastic. It was such a cool detail. This might not seem like a very significant thing, but it was something I definitely noticed as a fan of The Shining. I have seen that film far too many times. Fun personal story time. I used to have really bad insomnia when I was in secondary school, and I would end up getting up before school and just watching movies. I did not have a huge number of them, so I tended to watch the same movie over and over again. That movie was frequently The Shining. Many a morning before school, I would be up at 4 a.m. putting that VHS tape in and going through that journey and just waiting until the Tuesday morning segment. I don't think watching The Shining about 50 times as a teenager did me any harm, you know. I'm pretty well adjusted. All my chickens say so. In conclusion, we have got a really long wait until The Winds of Winter, The Doors of Stone, and The Thorn of Emblem, if any of them ever come out. You could do a lot worse than indulging in Dr. Sleep.
Red rum! Red rum! Red rum! Stop it! Red rum! Red rum!
Your chomping is going to be caught on the mic and I'm leaving it in.